All right, excellent. Today is the 37th episode of the Mental Breakthrough, and my guest Paul Binder here from high school, and we talked a little on Facebook, so I know we're going to talk about some specifics. You listened to the podcast with Josh Converse, so we'll definitely get to that. But before we do, I love life stories. I don't know that much about you prior to us meeting. I'm not even sure if we did. I mentioned before, yeah, if we met, I feel like it was possible. You went to Stanford. I don't know. I went to Bird Street from third grade to fifth grade. Then I went to Stanford. Then I went to Central. Then I went to Orville High School. I remember you from Orville High School. I remember we were both top 10. Woohoo, right? Top 10
Yeah.
class in the grade. Uh, and I remember you. I mean, I know you're in the military now, I remember you doing like Army Reserves, I think,
hmm
even in high school. Like you were one of the early
Yep.
ones. I remember you were the one. I remember that. So not a lot. So fill in all those gaps leading up to maybe Orville High School, and that was really the last time we would have had like conversations and just here and there, maybe on Facebook, which is cool to, because yeah, if we didn't have social media, we wouldn't have really had any contact. So it's nice to kind of reconnect to people we
hmm
knew and stuff. That's an interesting time in our development, when teenagers. So yeah,
Right.
fill me in.
Okay. Well, yeah, I went to Stanford. I don't remember you in Stanford, but truth be told, I don't remember a lot of my childhood. I don't know why. I don't think I was abused. I don't think there's trauma there. I just don't remember a lot of things.
Yeah,
Uh,
no,
it's like the older I get, the less I remember of the
yeah,
things that happened longer and longer ago.
yeah.
I went to Central. I still don't remember you in Central. I only really remember you in high school. I think I could be wrong, but I think that was the only time we ever had like classes together. I
Yeah.
remember some English class with Mr. Brown,
Okay.
but I don't have a lot of solid memories of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um, I just remember you wearing the Letterman jacket and wrestling and football and all that, and I was just kind of a nerd off into my own little world. And at 17, I actually joined the army then, and I
Okay.
was split up, what they call split option, which means my summer vacation between junior and senior year was army basic training. That
Okay.
was fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
I shipped out like I don't know a week and a half after we got out of junior year. Went
Oh, really?
to
Okay. Wow.
Fort
Okay.
Leonard Wood, Missouri, and was there until like August 26th or 28th, something like that. And I actually had to submit to the school a letter that said I was in basic training and they'd have to delay my enrollment or whatever. And I think it was Mr. Payne at the time, which is kind of funny. It was one of the things that kind of set my opinion of him early on.
Yeah.
Replied back like to the army, saying that basic training is not an excuse to miss school. So they would have to just not enroll me in school until I got back. So I literally missed like 2 or 3 days of senior year. But like, it's not like I can help when the army decides I can get out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's apparently not an excuse to miss school.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but that was a
Well, if there's
I was
a
already
war
pretty.
and you were like you had to fight in the war, they wouldn't excuse it either.
Yeah, well, I had to come home
Yeah.
because I was a minor, still a minor, and I
Yeah.
hadn't
Yeah.
finished
Yeah.
high
Yeah.
school yet.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's right. Yeah.
delaying enrollment was just kind of weird.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of been a loner, introverted, all that good stuff. And once I got back from basic training, it just kind of like compounded all that because now all of a sudden I had almost nothing in common with anybody. I
Oh,
remember
wow. Wow. Wow.
sitting in class and like people are mouthing off and like falling asleep in class and throwing stuff like juveniles
Yeah.
would.
Yeah.
And I was like back from basic training, I was intense to say the least. So I'm like sitting there thinking like you're gonna get us in trouble, you're gonna get us in trouble, because I was kind of used to the blanket punishment.
Yeah.
And so I'm like frowning on these guys and everybody in class being stupid. And it's just like I was just even more withdrawn then in senior year. So withdrawn, really, that I hung out with the teachers more than anybody else. I actually
Oh yeah.
hung out with Mr. Peak, the chemistry teacher, during lunch.
Yeah.
And, man, I kind of regret it. I signed up for what was it called? ASB, the Associated Student Body. It was like the leadership group. They're the
Yeah.
ones who put up the pep rallies and all that
Yeah.
nonsense, as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned. And I remember walking the halls with one of the lunch ladies, because one of the things we did as the Associated Student Body was help like load the sodas into the soda machine. And it's
Okay.
like, I didn't hang out with students, I hung out with teachers.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember one time, Mr. Horsley, I don't know if you ever knew him.
It sounds familiar, but
I,
I
I,
haven't had him. I can't think of
I've had his class, and I don't remember if I had his class senior year, if I was just bouncing around from the teachers' rooms that I knew. And I remember going into that trailer, and Mr. Horsley is literally trying to like fight this girl off of his computer because she was upset at whatever grade he gave her, and she was literally trying to get onto his computer and change her grade.
it. Yeah.
And I just thought that was like this is stupid. Like, why is this even a fight?
Yeah.
And what is she actually thinking?
Yeah.
And I was like, "Hey, Mr. Horsley, I know you can't throw her out, but I could throw her out. You want me to throw her out?" And she's like, "No, no, we're gonna figure this out." Blah blah blah. And I'm just sitting there watching this drama unfold during lunch. And then finally, I asked him again. He's like, "Okay, yes, you get her out of here." So I just grabbed her by the arm, drug her to the door, and tossed her out. It's like, what are you trying to really accomplish? And whatever. That was just kind of
Yeah.
part of how things were my senior year.
Yeah. That's funny. They
After
even
that,
had. I don't even remember teachers having computers. Was he was ahead of the game probably. I visualized them having their little their rule books of that. I mean, I think I remember trying to get into those maybe even. I mean, I feel like it's all penciled in on like a graph paper with spiral binder graph paper. That's how I remember most of our grades being in
yeah, I don't know.
the book.
There are a lot of details that I don't remember, but I kind of remember it being a computer. I could be
Yeah, yeah.
wrong. I don't
No, no,
know.
no, no. There were computers around there. I remember that's when I was I remember it was at Orville High School. I remember. And I mean, I know the internet had been around, but I mean, in like I don't know if you mean elementary school, it was like number munchers and Oregon Trail
Mm-hmm.
on the computer. So there
Yeah.
were computers, but I remember in the internet. I remember I think as a librarian or something. It was a big deal, and they walked us into the library, and there's like 8 computers or something. And we all sat down, and we typed in this long URL like HTTP, and they were showing
Mm-hmm.
us how to search, but there's no search engine, so it's like you had to type everything. And they were just like that was the whole thing was like you can't if you miss one letter you're not going to go to the right.
Right.
It's like an ad. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I just remember I mean it's an interesting time because I feel like it was right then. Of course, we graduated to 2000. And it seemed like right then at the turn of the millennium was when, and then like the next year in junior college, it was like everything was online, everything was internet, everything was search. So it just came out of nowhere
Yeah.
for me. But yeah,
I distinctly remember looking things up on the internet in the library at school, and
you
Mr. Domeyer, the computer/biology guy, he
yeah,
was all about Macintosh, and his whole
yeah,
lab was Macintosh, and so it was definitely around. I
yeah,
don't think I really had it at home. Like
yeah, yeah. I
I don't
guess
think
that's
my
what it
parents
was.
had
Yeah,
the
I guess
internet.
there were people using it. Yeah, because I remember the email. I remember the email came out. It was Yahoo, but see, I don't know. I guess I created an email at maybe in like 1999 or something. But anyway, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So no, I'm
weird
sure.
things have changed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm sure some of the teachers were doing it on there. I remember a lot of them are just still using the paper one. I think it took a while for you know Luddites to move on to
Hmm.
using it. But yeah, um. So you're still in the army now?
No, no, I got out in 2007. I finished 8 years, 21 days, and I said I was done.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. Is that
yeah,
enough to
because
get money for the rest of your life or something, or just?
well, I got disability for the rest of my life.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't realize. Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
Something.
yeah, that was fun. That was fun.
You want to talk about
After
that?
high
Yeah.
school, yeah, I'll keep my story going.
Sure.
After high school, I did my advanced individual training. It was actually, looking back, it was really, I don't know, kind of lame. I was essentially going to be a radio operator, and first line defense on fixing them if they broke. And I was top of my class, distinguished honor grad. And I ended up
Wait,
with,
so wait, yeah, yeah. Wait, let me. Any specific reason you went in the army other than, I mean, because I think I know my brother in the it seems like Air Force. Yeah, I know you're intelligent. Yeah, top 10 school. Not saying army people aren't, but it just seems like the other, what, the Air Force is more like trying to get the brightest or something, or is that just, that's just
yeah,
me?
they're pretty picky. The Air Force is pretty picky. I went into the army. I can't remember exactly why. I kind of wanted to do a wide variety of things, and I in my head at the time as a 17-year-old, I was like, Air Force is picky and they want like airplane people, pilots and whatnot, which is not entirely true.
Yeah,
And the Navy, I didn't really want to be on a boat. Of course, that's pretty stereotypical. They have land-based things
yeah,
too.
but yeah, but
And
so
Marines, I heard, were the hardest and the
yeah,
dumbest. And so it's like I didn't really want to be associated with the dumbest,
yeah, yeah.
which again still isn't entirely true.
Oh
Pretty
no, of course, yeah. I mean,
stereotypical.
it's the top
And
ones are
so
tough.
the army was kind of the middle of the road,
Yeah,
and they had a, whatever they do a lot of land stuff and artillery and whatever. And so I figured, that'll be kind of cool. But I also wanted the Montgomery GI Bill because at the time, like my whole life growing up, everyone's like, "Oh, you should be an engineer. You should be an engineer." And I spent many hours growing up in my parents' garage building things and breaking things and fixing things and breaking more things and all that kind of stuff. And I have a knack for building things. I still do because I'm super mechanically inclined.
okay,
And so I was like, okay, well, I couldn't get any scholarships, just like you and Josh talked about in your thing, because I'm
yeah,
a pasty white boy.
yeah,
And so it's like I got to find my own way. And fast forward a little bit and I could backtrack. I still couldn't get scholarships or financial aid, even though I was making less than $13,000 a year.
yeah,
And so they're like, you still got to make a little less. It's like I have to work less in order to get financial aid. It seems kind of counterintuitive to me, but whatever. I had the Montgomery GI Bill by then,
yeah.
but it was like the reserves version of it, which was just monthly payments for so many credits. I had to establish an ed plan, but whatever. So I was kind of going to Butte while I was doing my drill weekend stuff, and they paid for all of it. But I started engineering, and I didn't like how in engineering with the math they round a lot of things and kind of like abbreviate things, so to speak. Like if you have a patch of floor that's 3 feet by 4 feet, and you have a whole bunch of 1 foot square tiles, in the engineering world, that would require 10 tiles because you only measured 3 by 4, which is like one significant figure. If
Uh-huh.
you were to measure 3.0 and 4.0, then all of a sudden you'd have 12 tiles. I'm like, that's kind of retarded. If I have a 3 foot by 4 foot, regardless of how many point whatever is after it, give me 12 tiles because I know 10 is going to fall short.
Yeah,
And so I didn't like that. And
yeah,
I didn't like how we're in a lab and everybody is as much as 10 to 15% off in all their calculations, and it's still quote unquote correct.
yeah,
It's just, it depends on when you're around. I'm like, well,
yeah,
that's stupid. That's really imprecise as far as I'm concerned.
yeah.
And so I changed my major from that to, well, I had liked architectural drawing, CAD drawing. I was really good at it and I was really quick. But Butte College just, they wouldn't host the next series of classes. Like I took beginning AutoCAD and intermediate AutoCAD was like never available. They're like,
Oh,
oh, that's a fall class. So then I take general ed until fall, and then they don't list, and I'm like, what's going on? It's supposed to be a fall class. They're like, oh, it's next fall. It's like, okay, so I take another year of general ed, and then the next fall there still isn't listed. It's like, what is going on? Like, how do you even offer this as a career?
Yeah.
and not even have the classes. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess CAT is off unless I go someplace else. But then if I go someplace else, it's more expensive. I'm like a non-resident to Yuba City or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I like math, and I've kind of picked up a knack for teaching. Like I'm pretty patient. And so I started with math, and math is, perfect. 1 plus 1 is always 2. It's like whatever the circumstance is, 1 plus 1 is always going to be 2. There's no making it up as you go along. And so I took a liking for that. I ended up getting an associate's degree in math, which is one I actually tried for. With all the other classes I took, I ended up with an associate's degree in social and behavioral sciences, which I got by accident. And
From general ed
universe, and well, that's not the general ed. The university studies is general ed. I don't know how I ended up with social and behavioral sciences. I was just taking general ed so that whatever I did, I filled the categories, and nobody could argue that I haven't completed my general ed. And I just happened to end up with social and behavioral sciences. So at the end of all that, I had 3 associate's degrees that essentially got me nothing. And somewhere along there, I started to go to Chico State, and that was just so expensive. I couldn't afford that anymore, and so I went back to Butte, and I was going to do like accounting, and that like you don't even back then anyway. You didn't have to have a degree in accounting, as long as you knew accounting and could take the test. You could be a CPA, and so I was like, well, that's perfect. It's like I can, juggle numbers and I can do math. And I started taking, an accounting class, and I was like, this is pretty easy. Like I could totally do this. And during that class, I actually met my now wife, and so I kind of scrapped that and ended up moving to Virginia because she was shortly after. Yeah, she's from Virginia. Shortly after we met, she was actually diagnosed with stage 4 gastric cancer.
Wow.
And so it's like, well, this isn't going to be long. She was basically told by doctors she's going to die.
Yeah.
And ultimately she didn't, and she's still alive. Not that she doesn't have her issues, but long story short with that, it's an ongoing struggle, but she's still alive, and we're still married and have a house and stuff.
I mean, that's weird to beat it, but it still be there, or there's other complications. I mean,
well, her gastric cancer was essentially fixed by having her stomach and some of her intestines removed.
Oh, okay.
And that was a total trip, because obviously when you're missing the organ that's supposed to digest the food to give you nutrients, you're going to have some crazy weight loss. And they basically did a gastric bypass, but in her case, it was really specialized.
Taking out
and
large chunks.
Taking out the stomach. Wow. They left a little tiny pouch that's supposed to introduce acid into her intestines, and it kind of does. It kind of doesn't. And essentially, her esophagus and intestines are sewn together somewhere in there.
Wow. So, I mean, so you end up, this day, her diet has to be very specific and.
Yeah, especially at first, because there's what you call dumping syndrome, which is as nasty as it sounds. And it became a thing where she couldn't process sugar the way normal people process sugar. So we ended up finding the lucky number of like 9 grams of sugar. If anything was more than 9 grams, done. Case closed. She's going to be a wad on the bed and in the bathroom a lot.
Yeah.
And that's changed over the years. Like her body has started to adapt, but everything from that really kind of spiraled, because she used to be like normal person who could eat stuff, and then had the bypass, rapid weight loss, got down to like 87 pounds before the doctor decided that there was something wrong. And the gastric surgeons who do things like gastric bypass seem to think that they have this huge success rate. It's like, oh, hey, we've done these gastric bypasses and never hear from these people again, when it turns out, 85% of them die. Yeah, that's why they don't come back. And of course, once you take out their stomach, why would they need to come back? It's
Yeah.
like your job is done.
Yeah. Wow.
The part of the body that you service is not there anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
she, she ended up hooking up with this doctor um, who specialized in gastric patient recovery and ended up on TPN, which is total parenteral nutrition, where they put a Hickman catheter, which is really like an IV basically,
Okay.
that
Into
runs in about your collarbone and actually runs into near your heart, and you pump in this stuff like when we eat food, it breaks down into amino acids and proteins and yada yada yada. You basically have a bag of that sludge
yeah.
and pump that in, so it's almost like
Into your blood.
pre-digested nutrients into
No,
your
not
blood.
into you straight to your
Yep,
blood. Okay.
straight into your blood. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's how her body would essentially eat. And so
I guess
that
that's when
became a
somebody's
problem
in a
too.
coma, it's something like that, or
They could absolutely,
I
yeah.
mean,
I mean,
yeah,
if they have the ability, if they don't have the ability to like use the bathroom or something,
yeah,
then or having other issues like if they can't keep food down in a coma, obviously, you introduce food thing in ways like that into
and it's like a
TPN.
perfect. That's almost so. It's there's no waste. It's just like 100% utilized.
Uh,
Almost. I mean,
Pretty much,
I mean,
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, she still had to like eat, otherwise,
yeah,
you still feel hungry, and
yeah,
so she would just be miserable if she didn't eat anything ever.
yeah.
Um, Plus, she still have to hydrate,
Sure, yeah,
but the catheter she had initially actually had two lines, one for saline and one for TPN, so she could have two pumps going to be hydrated and be able to quote unquote eat.
yeah,
And that was a huge thing. That if insurance didn't cover that, it was like $33,000 a month. It's like no normal person can do anything like that.
yeah.
But complications arose from that too, because one time, you got pigtails hanging out by your collarbone. If you're not careful, it can get caught on stuff.
Yeah.
And she caught one. I mean, she's had a couple of the catheters in PICC lines where they put the same thing. It's just in your arm, about
Yeah.
your elbow, and she would catch it on stuff, and sometimes it would have to be extracted and then put back in a slightly different spot. Well,
Yeah.
one time she snagged it on something, and the whole area started turning red, like irritation red. It wasn't like blood red.
Yeah.
Basically, the line was unhappy, and she went in and had blood work done, which they draw straight from that tube. And they called us at like 11:30 at night and was like, "You need to get to the hospital. You have a blood infection. If you don't take care of this, you're gonna die. It's fatal." So she ended up in the hospital in this isolated room. I don't remember, like a week or two, and she felt okay. It was just they had to filter her blood and
Yeah.
introduce more saline and control uh, the TPN going through a different line because she's still got to do things like eat, and that was fun. I spent many hours sleeping on like hospital floors through
Oh
that
yeah.
stage. Oh man, and I don't know, man, that like all of that has absolutely killed my confidence in doctors and the medical system as a whole. It is atrocious. She fell down the stairs or something, slid down the stairs, like you do sometimes and hit your tailbone, sliding down the stairs. And she's had tailbone issues. And we went to whichever hospital it was. And we were there for 17 hours for them to tell us that basically nonsense. Like with all her medical issues, she's had a hysterectomy, a full hysterectomy. So no ovaries. And back and forth for 17 hours. The doctor came in and was like, "Oh, they're probably just ovarian cysts." It's like, you didn't even read her chart, did you? It's like, she doesn't have ovaries. There's no way her non existent ovaries are going to have cysts. Like, sorry, dude.
Yeah.
Wrong answer. And they just discharge her. It's like, so what about everything else that's going on? You're just going to like throw her out? And that's essentially what they did. And
Yeah.
that totally sucked because at that point, I was out of PTO for work. And it's like, I don't have any more time off for the rest of the year. And my buddy, he ended up being the best man in my wedding. Um, awesome dude. He was also my boss. It turns out, what I know now, he donated some of his PTO, his paid time off, so that I can maintain hours on my paycheck. It just came out of his time off. So he basically just gave me his time off.
Wow.
And at first, my employer was not on board with something like that. Now we have this whole PTO donation program because one of my buddies, my other buddies at work, his daughter was born with birth defects and a whole laundry list of problems, and he ran out of PTO, and he was at work, and the president of the company's like, "Why are you here?" He's like, "I'm out of PTO." It's like, why else would I be here if I could be, with my dying daughter in the hospital?
Yeah.
And that's when the PTO donation program started. It's
Oh,
like,
wow.
okay, we've had enough people here who have run out of PTO with like medical stuff that's going on. It's like, okay, well, we'll have a little sympathy here. And so now we have this PTO bank to hand out to people.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
So you said work, but you're not the army, not
No, I work
completely
for
different or thing you kind of
completely different, something completely
computer.
different because when I withdrew from the accounting class and moved to Virginia, I essentially moved here to watch my girlfriend at the time die. And I didn't really expect it to be all that long.
Yeah.
But as she kept kicking, I was like, all right, it's time to find a job. Like I need to do something like that.
Yeah.
And man, back then that was 2010. Now it was hard to find a job. Like I working in Oroville, I worked at Craig and Auto, which is now O'Reilly Auto. I worked there for 7 years, and when I got here to Virginia, I applied all the auto parts stores. It's like, man, I've got experience selling parts. I had an ASE certification. I had experience as a manager. It's like, give me something, and nobody would hire me.
Why?
Nobody would hire me.
Or what's why, are you just because
I don't know why. I don't know why, but that was the
accounting?
dawn of all of the applications being online. Like I
Oh,
drove all around trying to put in applications and nobody had paper applications anymore.
okay.
So I had to fill out everything online and everything online was just super tedious. Like I applied to Best Buy as just to give me some kind of job. And it took me 2 hours to fill out their application. It's like they want all this like mental health assessment, personality test stuff. And then at the end, it's like, cool, thanks for your application. We'll be in touch.
Yeah.
And then that's the last I hear.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with every auto parts place. I'm like, dude, like I have experience. If I could go there and I could talk to somebody like a
Yeah.
human,
Yeah.
you want to talk shop about cars, I could talk shop about cars. You would know immediately that I knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
But going through all the application stuff, they probably had so many applicants,
They
and it's
probably
just
hire through the word of mouth is probably, and they probably don't. That's their probably the last resort. Then I mean,
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it was, but I
yeah.
ended up getting my first job here in Virginia was with RGIS. I don't remember what it stands for, but they're inventory people. They go to different stores and do inventory. If you ever go to a big place like Walmart or Lowe's and you see people with these scanners scanning barcodes,
Yeah.
that's what I applied for. It was $8 an hour, which was like chump change. It was not enough to pay my bills, but um, it was something that I had to start with. And man, that job was super easy, but it sucked.
Yeah.
It sucked. Sometimes it'd be like, okay, well, we need to do inventory before this place opens. Be here at 3:45 in the morning. It's like, okay, oh, and it's an hour and a half away, and you have to drive there, and we don't pay you mileage. It's like, oh my goodness, this just sucks. And one time, you know, early in the morning like that, I forgot my little vest, you know, whatever
Okay.
the thing was called that with
Yeah.
the clip on the scanner. Like we had to buy the little vest thingy for that.
Yeah.
I forgot it. And so I was like, I drove all this way and they're like, well, you're not prepared. So just go on home. And it's like, well,
Oh,
this just sucks. Like I just blew, 4 gallons of gas, and it's like when you have no job, you're counting the gallons of gas it's going to take to get there and back, and then me doing math stuff, I'm going to calculate and be like, okay, I just lost $20 by driving here.
Yeah.
Like this totally sucks. And then it was kind of funny because my wife's family had a print shop, and I didn't know anything about printers, copiers, scanners, none of that. But I'm mechanically inclined, and I can Google things. And they had 2 machines that were down. There were 2 identical machines that were down with different problems. And I was able to scavenge parts from one to put into another and got one up and running. And then I heard about my current employer hiring, and so I applied. I applied for the supplies position, which is essentially like shipping toner to customers. It's like something's better than nothing, and if it pays more than $8 an hour, I'm a step ahead.
Yeah.
Because it's not that inventory company with giving me like 12 hours a week, and so I applied for it. I was just expecting not to hear anything from them because I hadn't heard from anybody I called or any of the applications. And then I got a call one day and they're like, hey, you want a job? I was like, sure. What's the job? And they're like, oh, you could be a delivery driver. I'm like, cool, I'll be a delivery driver. It's not what I signed up for, but hey, look at this. And so I got in with the copier company. And my intent was I wanted to be a technician. I wanted to fix them. I wanted to work on them because I kind of had fun, being mechanically inclined.
Yeah.
And so I got there and I was a delivery driver, and it was funny because we have this whole ambassador program, that's what we call it, for hiring new people. And we try to make the first day an awesome impression. My first day was, hey, welcome to Cobb, get on the truck. It was like, okay. So I filled out some paperwork and all the legal stuff, and then headed to what we call the beach, Tidewater. It's to the east of Richmond, to deliver a copier. And I was like, cool, I could do this. This is pretty easy. And they want to pay me like $13 an hour or something, which is more than I made in California as a manager. So I was like, oh, dude, like,
and cost of living is cheaper out there, or
significantly, like stupid cheaper.
Yeah.
It totally blew my mind. Of course, school out here is stupid more expensive
because you're non-resident, or you are.
No, I'm a resident. It's just more expensive. They just decided to set the prices to that. I don't know. And I remember, the numbers are probably off now, but I remember at Butte College being upset when my bill was like $550 for 12 units.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, like, how do people do this? Well, here it's like $500 per unit. And it's just like, well, I guess I'm never going back to school.
Yeah.
And ultimately I didn't. I'm kind of kicking myself for it. And they have other like online programs and stuff, but still, it's stupid expensive here in Virginia.
Yeah.
To do anything, but that's okay because I actually have a decent career now, and I actually make enough money to pay my bills and whatnot. And it's not a bad gig. But anyway, I was driving, just delivery driver, and when I was hired, I told them, hey, I want to be a tech. So it's like whenever you have an opening, you'll consider me. And I'm like, at this point, especially now, I can sell myself. Like I before I might have been a little timid and be like, well, I might do a good job. Now I can say things like, I learn really quickly, I adapt really well. My communication skills are pretty awesome, especially now. And so I can sell myself. And it's like, even if I don't know the job, I can learn it. I can learn anything. Like, watch me. It's like I challenge you to put me in a position that I can't learn. Bring it. So 3 months after I've been a driver, they're like, hey, we have this spot open as a technician. You want to be a technician still? I was like, yeah, totally. I missed my exit when I was delivering that machine when I was talking to them on the phone. If they're, asking if I want to be a tech, but
yeah,
that's all right. GPS was a solid thing back then. So I was able to turn myself around and get back on the road. And so I was a technician. I was fixing copiers. Man, I've learned a lot about it. And it's kind of funny to talk with people who don't know about laser printers and inkjet printers and stuff like that, because you can always tell if somebody knows something or if they don't know something, because I was totally oblivious. Like anybody who's outside the industry is completely oblivious. But I started out being a technician then, and I was a tech for another couple of years, and our in-house trainer got killed. He was actually shot in his front yard. That was a whole big thing. And, you know,
So
it,
mystic dispute. I mean, some random
what's up?
or is a random shooting or
No,
another
no,
neighbor
it
or
was a
family or
dispute.
friend?
He was a disgruntled dude and rough around the edges, but if you dealt with him on a daily basis, you kind of knew how to deal with him.
Yeah,
And man, did he love his gray goose. So he would get drunk a lot.
yeah.
And these kids would be riding their dirt bikes up and down the alley in the back or whatever, making a lot of noise, being disruptive. And he'd go out there screaming at them. Well, then one day, those two kids decided to go home, got a gun, came back, and there was a tussle and they shot him.
Wow, that's
Um,
pretty
I
good.
don't know all the details, but
Yeah,
still.
yeah.
Anyway, so he was gone, and I kind of felt bad because shortly after I heard that he was killed, I was kind of like, I want his job. Like that's
Yeah,
the job I want now. It's
yeah,
like I can teach people. I'm mechanically inclined. I can learn anything. Bring it.
yeah.
And it wasn't
And you
another
don't know these
year.
kids.
Well, it's
Yeah.
all they're all adults, so
Oh, yeah. The
that's
dirt bike.
definitely nice.
Oh, the dirt bike.
Oh, those kids,
No,
yeah, those
yeah,
kids,
those
yeah,
dirt bike. Yeah, the dirt bike guys. You don't know
yeah.
them and
Well,
how convenient and
right.
yeah.
The oldest kid, he was 19, I think. He
Okay.
got probation, and so did the 17-year-old. What they were doing with their hands on a gun, I don't understand
Yeah.
because we got
Well, it was just
all those
manslaughter
all
or something.
those.
Like they didn't. It wasn't murder.
I don't remember the
Yeah,
the details,
yeah,
but
but
their defense painted my predecessor as an angry drunk
which was true. But
and had
why did they
issues,
gun
which was true, but that doesn't give anybody the right to shoot him.
bring and especially
And
go
and
home, get a gun, and come back? That's premeditated.
exactly, especially a minor.
Yeah.
In Virginia, you have to be 21 to legally own a handgun.
Oh yeah.
So, as far as I'm concerned, the 19-year-old, the 17-year-old broke that law. Like
Yeah.
they should at least be in trouble for that. Uh,
Yeah.
anyway,
But yeah.
shortly, within the year, a little bit after that, they hired me as the trainer, and I've been training for uh, 10 years, 11 years now, something like that. Teaching people how to fix copiers.
Yeah.
Super exciting.
I got one right here. Actually, I have one right here. Maybe you could fix it. I don't really use it anymore now. This guy.
Hey, what is it? HP? Canon?
It's uh brother. It's a brother.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they don't make a lot of big ones. That's probably one you got from a big box store. I don't know what they have in Thailand, but
Yeah.
you
No,
get it. You
actually.
get it at something like Target or Walmart here.
Okay. Yeah. Somebody had it. Yeah. This when I was working at the university. We could have a high turnover as teaching English
Yeah,
and
you were saying
left
that.
behind. So what people buy it. Yeah, some people get it. They always buy. A lot of people come, they buy stuff, and then they leave, and then everybody just kind of like
Mm,
pillages the offices.
takes whatever's left.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
it's probably an inkjet.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's got a.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Is it?
I go to print shops now. It's just easier. I just write them. I send them a file. They print it out, and then I go
Yep.
pick it up. Now that's
Cool.
how. That's it.
Cool. That's probably a better way to do it because if
Yeah,
you don't print a lot at home, you don't really need one at home,
yeah.
especially if it's an inkjet because then the heads just clog up and it becomes a nightmare. And then
Yeah.
you end up spending more money on fixing it than you do buying
Yeah,
another thing.
that's what I found out. That yeah, I've got a place that's really cheap. Yeah, yeah. It's like a penny paper, a couple pennies of paper or something. So it's like yeah,
That's cool.
yeah,
That's cool. So yeah, in all of that too, it's kind of funny coming back full circle.
yeah.
Um, during my time in the army, I ended up going to almost the exact same place that Josh Converse did. He
Northern
ended up at
California, Monterey, or
no, overseas in
oh,
Kuwait.
Iraq or Kuwait. Okay, okay.
Hmm.
Because
And
of that. Okay, so that's during. I know we were in
OAF too. Yeah.
Iraq for a long time. Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, that was fun because it was 2003. It was like December 2003. We had our reserve drill weekend, And the command sergeant major is like, "Welcome to the longest drill weekend of your entire career." And then we got orders for 545 days. We were activated and ultimately sent overseas. So
Okay.
that was a mess. And
What did you have to
it's
do there?
kind of,
I mean, you said you're fixing radios on the front line.
yeah,
That sounds dangerous.
that was kind of
Oh,
funny too.
you didn't
No,
have.
that was mostly just radio operator, but I
Oh,
never
okay.
did the job. Like,
Okay.
so I signed up in 1999. In 2000 is when I finished that school for radio operator stuff. I
Yeah.
got back to my battalion, actually based in Sacramento, and I was part of headquarters company, and they said, "We don't really have anybody with your MOS, so we're just going to put you in second platoon with supply." And I'm like, okay, like I didn't know what was going on. And so I was in supply, and they're the ones who, if we ever did any field training stuff, they're the ones who brought food, MREs. They're the ones that issued your gear. If you needed new uniforms, you talk to supply. And that was actually a pretty cool gig. It was pretty boring, but it was a pretty cool gig because anytime you did anything exciting, you got first pick because you knew the guys of all the MREs. I knew the food. It's like,
Yeah.
hell yeah, let's keep this MRE for this guy.
Yeah.
You get buddies and stuff. And so you end up with first pick on like the new gear and all that stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that was pretty fun. But then when we were getting deployed, they're like, hey, we don't really need your MOS and headquarters company. You need to reclass or you're going to go with somebody else. I'm like, okay, well, what's available? And I was trying to reclass as supplies because I've done the job for like 5 years, and they kept canceling the class. And so I ended up doing this. Uh, what was it called? 31 Romeo digital group multiplexing. Essentially, it was providing things like internet and phone lines to the field. Okay, cool. Big dish that goes 60 feet in the air, line of sight communication stuff. I got honor grad in that, and when I got back to my battalion, they're like, "Hey, go talk to the motor sergeant. You're going to be the command sergeant major's driver." It's like, am I ever going to do a job in the army that I've actually like trained for? Apparently not. Long story short, I did not like ever do my MOS, any of my MOSs, because I ultimately ended up with a third one. So I go to the motor pool, and I get assigned a vehicle, and then I got to go to talk to the command sergeant major, who is the highest enlisted guy in the battalion, um, pretty much second only to the battalion commander. So it's like I'm gonna be around the top two guys in the whole battalion. It's like this kind of sucks, but that ended up being a pretty cool gig too. Because when I was overseas, I was basically the driver, and that's all I really did. I got a cool medal for not having any accidents in tactical vehicles for like 8,000 miles or whatever,
Okay.
and so that was okay. I didn't do anything super exciting though. There
No
was this
danger,
accident.
never close to any close call.
Not really, not really, because we were mostly in Kuwait. We would
Okay.
go into Iraq, and that was always interesting crossing the border into Iraq because there's this little town, Safwan,
I got
just
a cat.
north of the border.
You got
Huh?
cat. Yeah, I hear a cat. You
Yeah,
got.
there's a cat.
I love cats. But I
He's
love.
screaming downstairs for whatever reason. Um, anyway, we
Yeah.
crossed the border into Iraq, and there's this little town called Safwan, and it was your stereotypical mud hut kind of thing,
Okay.
where the houses aren't like buildings; they're literally like stacked up mud that became kind of like caves a little bit,
Yeah.
and there were
I,
always these kids running around in the road, and man, that sucked because our orders were don't stop the convoy. Like no matter what, you don't stop the convoy, and you don't stop in an area like that anyway because who knows what's going to pop out. And
okay.
so when we're going, we're just like, don't get in the road, kid. Don't get in the road. Don't get in the road. And we were not supposed to provide them with anything, but the command sergeant major would make what he called grenades, and they were these little plastic bottle things that he would put candy in. And so when we're driving along, we were usually the lead vehicle or one of them in the middle, and he'd throw them out to the side because you throw them out to the side, all the kids go running towards that bottle. They're like, "Oh, hey, goodies, goodies!" And so we would keep them out of the road.
Okay. Yeah.
And at one point, I don't remember what the circumstance was, what was actually going on at the time, but you can always tell when things are starting to get a little hotter because Safwan was clear. Like there was nobody there. You look around and they are just gone or hiding or whatever. And so we're going through an abandoned Safwan saying, I wonder what's going to happen today. Like, do I get to go home today?
So you're okay.
And
You could be in ambush at any time. You just there could be
yeah,
grenades
yeah,
at you or
something,
something. Wow, yeah,
something or anything.
yeah.
But in the southern part of Iraq, like in Safwan, and we went to this place, Camp Buka, I think it was by the port. They all seemed to love us. Like they're all like cheering and waving and happy and stuff. And I mean, that was one of the things I saw that conflicted with what everybody in the United States at the time was getting through things like the media.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I noticed when I was at Butte was people always said I had the look. Like nobody could ever explain what the look actually is, but everybody can tell that I was in the military, either was in the military or
Yeah,
used to be.
that,
It's like even now people say I have the look, and they ask me if if I was in the military because a lot of places around here give military discounts for stuff.
yeah.
And so they'll be like, "Were you in the military?" I was like, "Yeah." How'd you know? And they're like, "Oh, you just have the look." I'm like, "What does that even mean?" And nobody
You
can
still
really
have the
explain
haircut, or
it.
your haircut's different. That'll throw it up. Or your hair.
Well,
You got regular.
my hair's been running away from my face for a long time. So in 1999, when I shaved off my hair, I don't know if you remember, but I had long hair. It was down to my shoulders,
I remember you
and
having
I'd pull
long
it
hair.
back
Yeah,
in a ponytail because I was
yeah,
a skater.
yeah, yeah.
And I cut off all my hair. And the only other time since 1999 that I actually had any kind of hair that was worth mentioning was in 2007 when I got out. I tried
Okay.
to grow out my hair. I was like, I'm gonna grow out my hair so
And
it's
it,
long like it was. Like grow it out while I can grow it out,
yeah,
and then like donate it to Locks of Love or something like that. I figure if I can grow hair and these people can't, let me grow hair for some people. And I couldn't even grow hair anymore.
yeah.
Like when I cut it off, it was straight as a board. But when I got back after having been bald for 8 years, uh, my hair grew out wavy, and I was like, "What do I even do with this? Like, I don't know how to do wavy hair. I've never dealt with wavy hair before." And it didn't really matter because it was falling out faster, and I can grow it anyway. And I remember distinctly looking at having to declog the shower like every day.
Yeah.
I'm like, "This is stupid. I'm going to shave my head again." And so I've been bald ever since. But I guess if that's the look,
Well,
then
no, no, it's more than that. No, 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 it's
well,
shoulders,
yeah.
walking, and
Mm-hmm.
if you're gonna say sir and ma'am a lot for sure. That if but not just those, the words
Yeah.
specifically, just the way you speak can be. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
I usually avoid social interaction.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's just part of me. I'm asocial. So this is weird, but I crave like intellectual conversation, which I don't usually get with people, and a lot of people end up so emotionally charged that it's just not fun anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I'd rather have a conversation with people who aren't just going to be
Okay.
pissed off 10 minutes into it.
Well, good. You're in the right place because that's exactly. I'm the same. I'm actually the opposite in a way because I'm an extrovert. My wife is extremely introvert though, and so, and we live out in the out in an orchard, far from a village, far from the major city. So it's like we're just here. So but it's weird. We both kind of agree. I'm actually I love the nature. So it's like I've become more introvert, but I do still I seek this. So what we're doing right now is that's why I started this podcast just to any and I'm always invite people and it's funny and you're probably talking about like social media sometimes things get heated when you talk when you type stuff it's so much easier to for people to just take it
Misinterpret it.
yeah I mean just take it with the tone they
Mm-hmm.
read it in the tone that maybe they feel or I mean I'm not saying
Absolutely,
anymore
absolutely.
I'm
It's
also on that edge that's why I did the video to you it's the only way
yeah,
to show
yeah.
like okay I'm gonna respond in a video even I've done that one time somebody's like that's not what I don't. They'll still. I'm like, dude. Like, I swear, I was just trying to talk like with as much, just
Mm-hmm.
like this is.
Yep.
I value this. I value your perspective as like but they take it as like I'm mocking them sometimes or something. And it's like I'm trying to be as legit as possible. This is
Right.
seriously what I seek. I would love to have this conversation. So, yeah, thank you for kind of recognizing that, yeah, that I'm
Mm-hmm.
sincere, and we do seek this. And I know you're an intellectual person. Like I said, that was what I remember of you, and it's valuable, and we there's less of it in your case. Yeah, maybe by choice, maybe just more, but by here it's like I'm kind of I'm not stuck. This is exactly where I want to be. I love it, but
Mm-hmm.
I do also crave the intellectual conversation. So I
Mm-hmm.
hope. Uh, so yeah, we can
Yeah.
go. Uh,
We can go deep. I have a list of things that I wrote down
yeah,
after you and Josh were talking, and
yeah,
it's funny when you were replying with a video, and that's totally cool. I'm not opposed to that. One of the things I do like about having to type it out is it makes me think more, and that's one thing I've learned as an instructor is sometimes you can say the same thing 8 different ways, but only one of those is going to be the way that whoever you're talking to is going to interpret correctly.
sure,
So I kind of like typing it out because it makes me think of trying to be very specific and not so much concise. Like I can type a
sure,
novel and say one thing, but in that novel will be the whole thought process of whatever it is I'm trying to convey to somebody, hopefully to eliminate any kind of fogginess. I'm trying to make sure that what I am trying to say, you're going to actually get what I'm trying to say,
yeah,
not like an interpretation. That's one of the things I've learned about communication as far as paraphrasing.
yeah,
You say something to me and I say it back to you in my own words, and if it doesn't sound to you like what you're trying to tell me, then we obviously have a miscommunication and we
yeah,
need to revisit whatever that is,
yeah,
because obviously I'm not necessarily receiving what you're trying to give
sure,
me. And so then, the conversation gets longer and you end up with a better form of communication.
yeah,
But
yeah. No,
this is probably,
yeah. No, I like typing stuff out, but it's timely. I remember there's a famous quote about like, oh, sorry, the letter's so long, I didn't have time enough. I didn't have a long enough
yeah.
time to make it shorter, like because that's like, I mean, yeah, that's why I did the video. I was like, because yeah, I was in the middle of stuff. I'm like, I was initially typing. I was like, this is gonna take actually long. This would take me. I could spend hours on my response. I'm gonna just give you like 7 ramble instead. Hope you can accept that. And then I did do that Chat GPT thing. I'm pretty impressed with Chat GPT. I did an audio and that kind of took time too, but I'm playing around with it because I create English lessons. I teach online, and sometimes I do that. I'll just do like I'm bored and I'll just do an audio, and then and it's all like broken grammar, everything, and it's just I do it like on Word. I push the microphone and just to give a rant, and then I give it to ChatGPT, and I'm just like, hey, organize these thoughts for me, and then I'll reread them. I'm like, hey, it's pretty good. I'll change a couple of things maybe if I wasn't probably clear enough, but it's like but yeah.
No, cool. You want to get into it because I
Yeah,
have a list.
but yeah, let's get into it. Yeah, I like it. I like the. I mean, it's like I think about these topics every day, and so
Mhm.
it's fun to boom to be challenged with stuff I say, and stuff, or asked to. Sometimes the questions are wow, that's actually a good question that helps me understand my own thoughts better and everything. So
Mhm.
um,
Yep.
yeah, let's do it.
Yep. Okay. Well, to start off, I'm not nearly as well read as like you or Josh. Like I don't have literature to cite or anything like that, but
Yeah,
I have my own experiences that have caused me to ask myself questions and help me interpret what other people are trying to say. So
sure.
one of the things I've noticed about, generally speaking, uh, people in communication is we rely a lot on definition, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, but it kind of forces us to cram things into little boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing if you're willing to expand those boxes. And a perfect example would be like silverware in the kitchen. It's like, okay, here's a drawer full of silverware. You got all the knives, forks, spoons, blah, 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 in that drawer. And it's like, okay, that's in its box. This is the utensil drawer. But that's pretty disorganized. So if we add our little dividers in there and call it, this is the fork spot and this is the spoon spot, then we take our utensils drawer and we give it some organization. And I think where things like relying on definition becomes a problem is when we talk about things like good versus evil, right versus wrong, the political left and political right.
Yeah.
Because in all of those examples, that's pretty much binary. It's a dichotomy we come up with, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but like a traditional scientific dichotomy is it's this or it's not this. It's like it's the political left or it's not the political left, and that not the political left could be the whole utensil drawer.
Yeah.
So you have the left and then the not left, and then you look at the not left and say, okay, what can that be divided up into?
Mm-hmm.
If it's only the right, then all you have is left and right, and that's not cool. That's not how my brain works.
Yeah.
I could take values from either side and be like, okay, that has merit, that has merit, that has merit, and all of a sudden I don't fit in either one of those boxes.
Yeah.
So what do you do with the people who don't fit these definitions, these boxes that we cram everybody into? One of the things you and Josh were talking about was things that are good and things that are evil or right and wrong, whatever. And it's like, is there such a thing that is not necessarily 100% evil or 100% good? And one example I think of is like killing somebody in self-defense. If I'm in my house with my family and some dude comes in and breaks down my front door and shows me that they are willing to kick in my front door and harm me or my family, what do I do that isn't going to be categorically evil if I neutralize the threat? If I shoot him, is that good or is that evil or is that somewhere in the middle? Is defending my family good? Okay, yeah, that sounds pretty good. Is killing this dude bad? Murder's still illegal. But then how do I protect my family when I have a crazy dude who's willing to kick in my door and pose a threat to my family? So you don't really have this right and wrong solo 2 boxes to cram this event. It's like the killing is bad, but the protecting my family is good. The overall situation is what? Good, bad, somewhere in the middle, So when we try to cram things into those boxes, that shouldn't be crammed into those boxes, or is a little more complicated than those boxes would allow. The openness to create a new box, like an exception to something, exception to a rule, is, I think, one of the things we're lacking as a whole, because we're trying to squeeze things into boxes.
Yeah.
What do you think about definitions and cramming things into boxes? I'm sure in thinking about this, you can find something that you cram into a box.
Yeah, well, I mean, to go back, it's funny to go back to that analogy of the silverware drawer. I always joke about the everything drawer that I always had in every house in America. There's lots of drawers, but over time they would all become the everything drawer. I'm extremely disorganized with drawers and cupboards and boxes. And so my method. So we built our house here. We bought this land first, and then we just have this. Actually, the room I'm in now is just this one room. Like it was $6,000. It was delivered. It's not really a trailer. It's more of a steel. It's prefab, but it's like a steel.
Yeah.
Then they kind of assembled it when they got here, and we lived here for a couple of years, and then I was working, and we slowly built another house, which it's all brick from we go about locals, our neighbors that have orchards and stuff, and slowly built this. And my whole thing was like, I don't want drawers, but I want a lot of counter space. If I'm gonna organize something, I have to have it all out. Now I still do have. I've got everything boxes. Like it's either that or that. It's either out on display, organized, and if it doesn't have, if I'm unable to, if it doesn't have a place, like my counter, my kitchen is not. We have a big, huge kitchen and I made it with these big. We only have 2 rooms. We have a living room, big living room. We all sleep together. My son's eventually, of course, he'll probably want his own thing, but he's almost 4, like 3, and actually today it's the 13th. He's 3 and 5, 6 old today. Yeah, so yeah, we have a big bed, and then there's a big counter, like a counter that we made it with brick in this top. So like we're cluttered though. We're not, I wouldn't say we're organized, but it's out there. It's either out or it's in a box. And then if it's in the box, it's like, I don't want to go through it. I don't even want to open it. I would be fine if someone just said, hey, we're going to take this box, and I'd be cool. But if you open that box, I'm going to want everything in it. Like I'm not going to have one thing.
But do you know what's in that box?
No, but I know that if I need something, I know things. There's sometimes I know I have something and I know it's in one of those boxes.
Growing up, we had the junk drawer, and the junk drawer was where we had, a small selection of tools like a screwdriver, or some pliers, or like picture hanging devices, little hooks and nails.
Yeah.
Miscellaneous screws, door hinge pins, stuff like that. Stuff that like doesn't really have a home, but it's still kind of useful. Like we were pretty good at using stuff from the junk drawer.
Yeah.
And now I just have my shop, which right now is a wreck, but I work on so many different things. Like I've worked on my car all weekend and my in-laws' car all weekend. So I have tools all over the place. But for the most part, everything has a home. Like I can put it somewhere where it belongs. And that's how I can find it in my chaos.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, I can find, things are, that's kind of how it is. If it's not in the box, like if it, once it goes in the box, then it's low, like, but most of it is actually, out on this countertop. We have like I said, the big countertop here, big countertop in the kitchen, and then for like my land stuff. But anyway, so yeah, I want to bring that. I don't know if that's analogous to the way I conceptualize things or not. It was just interesting. I had to throw that out there. I wonder if that's what was the original question though, about like how I conceptualize definitions. And
I think it's more, I know that you tie some things to definitions just because of the conversation you had with Josh and some of the stuff you put on this Facebook page. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying it's normal.
Yeah.
And if you're mindful of it, cool. If you're not mindful of it, whatever. It's how your brain processes stuff. And it's totally cool to be different. And I think that's another thing that people are missing when they're cramming things into boxes. But yes, one of the things I know that you cram into a box is the whole concept of dualism. Okay. It's how you separate, us people being stuck in matter, space, time, and your concept of something else is out there being in a slightly different spot. It's like you recognize the something is out there as not being in the matter, space, time box.
Sure.
And so that is already how your brain processes that information as far as cramming it into boxes. Yeah. You're creating a definition. You're saying, okay, the something out there doesn't fit whatever it is you're thinking as defining whatever fits into the matter, space, time box.
Yeah, I guess the only thing, the way I conceptualize it, what you're saying is absolutely correct. I don't visualize it. I visualize it as underlying, like I don't feel that I don't feel like it's out there. I don't feel it's separate. I feel that the matter, time, space has to only be able to exist if there's something underlying it. So it is it's more of a what is it all like so it's I'm not separating it. I'm kind of saying the existence of matter has to be dependent on something immaterial that
Right,
without
right.
it, it wouldn't exist. So
Right, and I would agree, but the concept of matter, space, time existing only as something else exists is already separating the two into different boxes.
wait, say
Because
that.
one is
Yeah.
the existence of the whole matter, space, time
Mhm.
box that you put reality in as we know it,
Okay.
being dependent on something else underlying is already suggesting that the something that is underlying is not in the matter, space, time box.
Okay. Okay.
So it's already kind of separating those two ideas, even though you're kind of thinking like one of the things that I wrote down is maybe these things that we're calling matter space time and the something else that the matter space time is dependent on are just pieces of a whole. So if you look at a pie has, I don't know, blueberries, it has some flour, it has some sugar, and whatever else goes into making a pie. Each one of those things, you can say the blueberry isn't sugar and the sugar isn't flour, but
Mhm.
all of those things together is what makes the pie. So when we're talking about matter, space, time, and being dependent on the something else that's out there, we're talking about the universe as a whole, so to speak. So the whole consists of the matter, space, time, and its underlying something is out there.
Mhm.
So even though we can kind of say that they're separate, they're still kind of in the same realm as far as the whole picture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does kind of, and that was actually because this was in my so when I talked about one of the problems for me with dualism is why stop at two. That's one of
Ah,
the reasons.
yes.
So it's not necessary. It's true that actually I wrote a paper in college. My bachelor's was in philosophy, and that's when I first was kind of introduced into this thing. I think I didn't think about it as deeply, and there are very few people who would be considered philosophical idealists, and but I kept coming to it. I mean, but every time we talk about dualism, it was always matter and consciousness and which one controls which, and then I came up with that I either need to put everything into one or there's no limit, and I guess that to me was problematic, not not impossible, but just uncomfortably like, and basically so if once I could accept that there could be two things that are unrelatedly exist, and then that's just cats out of the bag, can of worms, Pandora's box. It's infinite, and I don't like infinite. I don't like that concept because but that still seems uh
What's wrong with infinite?
infinite amount of different I guess it's still, that still seems like well, I mean, no, there's an, I guess infinite is, it's, that seems like it depends on space and matter and time. Like I guess it's still like it still seems like it's uh, a numerical concept almost, even though it's not. Uh, well, yeah, that's, I guess, okay, yeah, what is the
When I
problem?
think
Yeah,
about like the possibility of infinite, like what we're talking about with the unrelated things that are still kind of bound together, it makes me think like multiple dimensions kind of thing.
mm-hmm.
Like, how do we know? Like, if I said no to having this conversation, what kind of effect would that have on our lives down the road?
Yeah,
You know, every time we're faced with a decision, we choose this, that, or the other thing.
sure.
Could that potentially be like there's another dimension out there outside
Sure.
of our space time, matter space time, that could be tied in with this something else is out there, creating almost a whole separate reality where I made a different decision.
Oh yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
the possible
could that,
universes
but
that,
like that's where I think that the concept of infinity, isn't necessarily. I mean, I guess I wouldn't classify it really as like a good or a bad thing. I would just say that's a cool concept to think about, but
Yeah.
I don't think there's any way I would be able to ever necessarily experience it. But
Sure.
maybe at some point dimensions come together, like when you get that feeling of deja vu, like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I've done
Yeah.
this before. Maybe that's where
Maybe we're not
two
possible.
dimensions
Actually.
are overlapping for a second.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know
Yeah. Like you could have done two completely different things, but you would have ended up in the same place. And
Right.
that is
and
interesting.
and
Oh, yeah.
and actually that brings up another thing that um, I had been thinking about as far as talking about things like the randomness. Like you're saying, like things are either are or aren't random. I don't remember which way you went with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
As far as,
I'd say no, but you're saying maybe they could be both, or
well, yes,
or
actually,
yeah.
I'm saying it could be both,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
a
Oh, yeah.
lot of things that
That
come
makes
up.
sense.
Well, a lot of things that come up in the theological community is things like, does God give us free will,
Hmm.
or is everything predetermined, predestination?
Hmm.
And it's hard for me to think, oh, everything's been decided for me.
Sure.
It doesn't matter what I actually think. It doesn't matter what I actually feel because I'm just on this path. And I don't think that I agree with that so much. But, asterisk, I think we have free will until, like God, would have something specific happen. Like what I've said a lot of times was like, I wonder if Judas actually went to hell. Judas, the betrayer of Jesus.
I'm actually
Did
not
he go
familiar
to
with
hell?
specifically about that story.
Okay.
I've heard the name Judas.
So Judas is the betrayer of Jesus. Judas is the guy who turned him over to be crucified.
Okay.
And he was also one of the 12 disciples, those supposed followers.
Okay.
So
Okay. I didn't know.
he is a follower, and then all of a sudden he turns Jesus over to be crucified. Seems a little sketchy to me.
Yeah.
And there are other instances in the Bible where it says, oh, God hardened his heart. And it's like, okay, well, then obviously there's some divine intervention in that story.
Yeah.
And if there's divine intervention into that story, how do we know there's not divine intervention everywhere else? Or how do we know that that was the first or last time? So, what I think about as far as the randomness and free will, destiny slash fate is, I wonder if we have free will until God wants something to happen. So, Judas, the follower of Jesus, the betrayer, all of a sudden becomes a tool for God to use. So God says, okay, we're going to fulfill prophecy by doing this. Well, somebody has to do this in order for the prophecy to be fulfilled. So then it's like, okay, did Judas have a choice, like free will?
Mhm.
Or did he grow up his whole life to be doomed?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, if God is going to say, oh, hey, you're born, your name is Judas, you're going to hell from the day he's born, that doesn't seem like a very merciful kind of God that the Bible talks about.
Yeah.
So then I wonder, like, is Judas a follower of Jesus being used by God to fulfill the prophecy and then going to heaven because he has fulfilled his duty? You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And so, well, and of course, that's operating under the assumption that there is a God. Like if you're taking the something out there that matter space time is reliant on or dependent on, and for no other, having no other actual definition or way to categorize the something out there. Say, for instance, we call it God.
Mhm.
How that influences something like matter space and time
Mhm.
is just kind of like, it's a level that we don't understand anyway. I think, at
Yeah.
least not very well.
Yeah. I guess yeah. The on like a metaphysical level, that where that concept kind of coincides with my yeah my thoughts on at some point. So there's some things that I say that are almost then I've heard Christians say something. I'm like, wow, that's kind of in line. Wow, that's kind of what I've come up on my own. And the idea is that, and this isn't necessarily what I believe, but it's kind of the way I conceptualize things at this point. This is kind of what I have kind of created. And we talked about two things. So what is, if there is some underlying thing that you could call God, but I came to understand this something that is exists without time, and like I don't even like using. I can't say it's always been there because that's implying that like it's time. It's just I guess
That's also
I'll call
kind
it
of going back to infinity.
yeah. I'll call it the nature. I like calling it the nature of reality, and so the nature of reality exists, and at some point, time and matter and space came out of it. And so I thought the only way it would be possible would have to think of itself. So I usually think of consciousness, though it could be energy, it could be love, it's some force of some sort. I tend to just think of it as consciousness, but not as we think of the self. And then so how did what we experience in this realm ever come to existence? And the only way in my mind would be, if that consciousness had to think of itself. And that almost coincides with the idea of, I've heard something like, and God created man in the image of himself or something. Like I'm like, okay, whoa, like those that kind of I kind of like that concept of like it thinks of itself and it's able to create a material manifestation of its consciousness. So like therefore all the material world that we know is an expression of thought. Okay, that kind of makes sense to me. And then but to tie that in with what you're saying, if there it is, so it's like the question becomes, is this material realm, which I'm calling an expression of thought, there it is, and it's once it exists, it's not going to be changed? Or could it therefore after that reconsider and express differently and affect that one? Or once this one was put into motion, is it set? And so I guess so but what I tend to think of as it is, if there is no actual time, we experience things in time, but actually everything in existence and everything that we ever known before and after is the expression of one thing, and that one thing is the nature of the universe. So in that sense, I tend to not, I'm not saying it can't be, but I don't conceptualize that it's going to continue making changes, because everything that exists is the expression of one thing, and that's the nature of the universe. So I don't know if that makes sense, but so I don't think of it as I have a hard time thinking of God as a creator that exists outside and can continue tinkering with it. Not that that's impossible, but that's to me that's like me that would seem like if that were the case, then there's still something that's going to encapsulate all that. I feel like it has to be the same thing, that everything we experience ultimately is that thing.
Is the underlying thing that matter space time is dependent on. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. That's
okay. Yeah, I think that would make sense. And I think like when you just said about, creating, man and woman in his image, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's kind of funny because when you were talking to Josh, talking about the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, and he was talking
Can you
about.
give me a better? I didn't understand the ghost part. So wait, actually, yeah. Are you? What is your Christian?
I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian, born and raised, and I went through my own period where I'm kind of like, well, does this really make sense? Like, how do I really know? Fill in the blank. And that's, I think, where faith comes in. And that's, I think, faith is like, it sticks out in my head as a type of consciousness. Like, what happens to us when we sleep? We don't know. We're asleep. We're gone. And unless we're dreaming, we've got nothing. We literally close our eyes and then wake up again. But we wake up again and we still have thoughts and we still have feelings. It's like, what happened during that downtime? And I think what happens in that downtime is essentially like, we'll just say our soul, because we're cramming things into boxes, our essence, our spirit, whatever you want to call it, is kind of, having a little time off. It's like, okay, well, the body needs to rest, and we recall nothing because our thought process, our consciousness, and all that is just kind of on pause. But anyway, I've been born and raised a Christian, and I've had my issues with faith before, and to me, this is another thing that I wrote down on my list is about how our brains fill in what we don't know. And I think that is a huge concept, really, not even just on like the science, physics portion of things, and the fact like everything you're looking at right now is actually upside down in your brain. Our brain takes what we see, flips it around in upside down in our brain because that's how lenses work. The physics aspect, and then our brain corrects it, and now it's right side up. So when we look up, we're actually looking up instead of looking down. It's not like looking through a telescope with lenses that flip things over. And outside of
that's
all
a real
that,
mechanical way to look at it. In a sense, if you think about it, it's like it still is just, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's we break it down like that, but it's still we see. Oh, anyway, keep going on. But yeah, I don't want to. I just I have a.
whatever. We're going back to brains filling in what we don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I
Yeah. Okay,
think
that's a good point. Yeah.
that was.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that
There's
is
even
kind
like
of
black
how.
spots and stuff. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yes.
For our comfort.
And,
yeah. Really.
Yeah. Sometimes I think it's kind of a defense mechanism too.
Yeah. No, for me,
you
I
really
know. Oh
wanna...
no. It's a lot of my biases or tendencies to believe something is for my own comfort and I like I have faith. Like I mean I have faith that I'm too. I mean I don't think faith, the word faith, I don't think is I don't think Christianity would own it to have faith or not. I mean, like I mean, if you ask me, do I have faith? I have faith, but I think it might mean something differently. But it's like
it's one of those words like the Greeks have however many words for love, and they mean different things, and in English we just call it love. I think that's one of those things that can be divided up. That's our utensil drawer with a whole bunch of junk in it. If we take faith and we can divide it up into different kinds of faith, then you can absolutely say like, yeah, I have faith in myself, I have faith in my wife, I have faith that the sun's going to rise tomorrow. Is that's not the same type of faith, I would say, related to the something else is out there that matter space time is dependent on, but it's still kind of the same concept, I think. Believing in something like you don't actually know the sun's going to rise tomorrow. You don't actually know that unless somehow or another you're outside of space and time and you know that the sun's going to rise tomorrow. You don't really know that. But that's one of those things I think that the brain fills in, like what you're saying for comfort, is so I'm not going to worry tonight, like, oh my gosh, the sun's not going to rise tomorrow. We're all going to be dead. End of the world. It keeps me from panicking when my brain fills in some of the empty space. And I think that the brain filling things in is also how belief in people kind of works. Like you can be a trusting person or a not trusting person, and if you've been burned too many times, you're going to look at this new person who has entered your life and be like, I don't trust them by default because I've been burned too many times. And in that essence, you don't have faith in that person. And your brain has already filled in how your interaction is going to be with this particular person. because you're making the assumptions also based on past experiences. And I think that's also how prejudice happens. And of course, people are prejudiced about everything. I don't
Yeah.
particularly like cucumbers. I'm sorry if you tell me
You
it's
know,
full of
do you
cucumbers.
also not
I'm
like
going into it.
zucchinis because of that?
I've never actually had a zucchini,
Never had
but
a
if it's like a cucumber, I'm
yeah,
defaulting to I
yeah.
probably won't like
That's
it,
probably why.
and so I'm also building the
Give a
expectation.
zucchini
Like,
a chance. And what's interesting out here, I gotta just say, is cucumber. It's funny. My wife, or in Thai in general, they cook cucumbers, eat fried cucumbers, and they eat zucchinis raw. And in America, I mean, I've always eaten. I would think of cucumbers as raw. You put them on salads, you could
right.
eat them,
Uh-huh.
and we cook zucchinis, and it's actually wonderful. It's delicious, and so maybe swap it
Yeah,
around or try some
I don't actually
zucchini.
mind zucchini, not zucchinis. I don't actually mind cucumbers, but
Yeah.
that was the first thing that
Okay,
popped into my head. I can
okay.
say I really don't like tomatoes. I just
Me
don't.
either. I don't like I don't like raw tomatoes.
uh,
I like tomato sauce and pizza sauce. Salsa if it's marinated with
See,
cilantro.
I don't really. I mean, like, I'll
You
eat
don't like
pizza
that.
with pizza sauce, but if it's
Oh,
too saucy,
oh
that's
yeah. Okay,
I don't
wow.
know.
You're
It's just
separate
tomato stuff.
from me.
I don't like ketchup like at all.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
ketchup is just gross. But whatever.
All
And
right.
that's my
Prejudice,
experiences
definitely.
influence my expectations. So if you tell
Sure.
me it's got ketchup on it, I probably won't like it. uh, anyway,
But yeah,
where was I going with
yeah, I
that?
broke you off with at prejudice of
Oh
and
yes,
yeah,
prejudice, and prejudice isn't necessarily a bad thing.
sure,
It
sure.
could
Well,
be
it's necessary for
well.
for
I gotta say,
short
when
term. I
people
mean,
start,
you got to make quick decisions or something. Yeah.
yeah, or you're, because when we talk about prejudice, immediately people think racism,
Racist. Yeah, yeah, that's it.
and prejudice is just prejudging something. I'm prejudging something made out of tomatoes, and that's still prejudice. It's just not the prejudice that we've been preached to about
Sure.
in media and school and all that stuff,
Yeah.
because you know
Yeah.
all the word really means is you're judging something prematurely
Yeah. You're
based off of whatever. It doesn't even
it
matter.
almost goes back to the
But
randomness thing. It's basically recognizing that not everything's random in a way. I mean,
mhm,
let's look at the non-randomness at least and make a best judgment. Yeah, I think it's a useful tool.
yeah. But yeah, so our brain fills things in, and it supports things like prejudice. And it isn't necessarily a bad thing. If I'm out in the wild and I see a bear, I can't be like, oh, well, maybe this bear's not going to eat me. I'm going to assume, I'm going to judge this bear prematurely based on what I've heard and what I've learned about bears in the wild. And I'm going to assume that it's going to eat me, or will want to anyway. So I'm going to avoid it. So that's another instance where prejudice isn't necessarily a bad thing. Of course, we can run all day with how
Yeah,
prejudice is a bad thing,
sure.
but when our brains fill in these things for us, we can react more quickly. Like you were saying, if I saw a bear, I don't have to be like, well, is it right to judge this bear? Is this bear really going to eat me? Is it not going to eat me? It's like, there's a bear, I'm out of here.
Yeah,
So, um, not just for comfort, but also for safety.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And that, the way the brain fills in kind of makes me wonder sometimes, like, how much is my brain lying to me? And I think
Well, yeah, yeah.
in situations like having discussions like this, I have to wonder sometimes what my brain is filling in versus what I'm actually understanding.
Yeah,
And of
yeah,
the things that my brain is filling in, how much of it do I believe? And I think that's one of the things that trip people up as far as becoming emotionally charged,
hmm,
because you could say something that would offend me and I might immediately become defensive and then have to pause and be like, hold on, is that really what you meant? Because my brain filled in that you're attacking me.
sure.
And if you're not actually attacking me, then my brain needs to shut up for a second so we can actually have a conversation and
Yeah,
figure out where either the miscommunication happened or whether or not you're actually attacking me. And
sure.
so
Yeah,
having to put the brain's reaction, its tendency to fill in the blanks, on hold is one of the things that's people are lacking
hmm,
in a lot of instances.
hmm, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Um, yeah, no, that's yeah. definitely what yeah, no, that's kind, yeah, that's yeah, I think that's why we're here to do it, and to yeah, just to have a long form uh discussion where you go back and forth. It's almost the only way. I mean, it's not just in yeah, it's not just about understanding the other person, but it really makes you kind of question some of your own thought processes. So it's yeah, it's an amazing dynamic actually, and that's why yeah, I'm glad you listened to our conversation and had the like I think you mentioned yeah, you kind of wanted to jump in sometimes because
Mm-hmm.
that's also interesting too, though. I think this is valuable for other people too, and I'd like to do a three-way as well. I've had one with three people, and that's a different dynamic too. And then each person kind of, but somebody that's listening to this is also able to gain something that neither of us are actually involved in, and that's there's and I've had that before. I guess it'd be with my parents sometimes. When I remember watching them sometimes, and sometimes I would understand what they're like. They might be arguing about something, and I can see it better than either of them. I'm like, whoa, no, no, no. And sometimes I would, but if I try to get involved, so there's probably situations in that sense too, where actually being a bystander is able to look in to
Mm-hmm.
the or listen to the conversation. So maybe you experience
I have
that.
a word for those people.
Yeah,
I call them spotters.
sputters.
Spotters, because like when I'm watching two people have a fight or people who are struggling in their relationship or whatever,
Yeah,
I mean, too many times I've said things like, "You're just too close to it right now. Like you're not seeing the whole thing. You're seeing what is right in front of you."
yeah,
And even though I'm not in their position, seeing what is exactly in front of them, I can tell them, "Hey, I'm on the outside. Like this is what I'm seeing from the outside," and a lot of times that's valuable information,
sure. Yeah,
and they can choose whether or not to listen. But if I'm like, "Hey, this is a problem," or "This is gonna be a problem," and then the whole thing bites them in the ass, it's like, dude, I tried to tell you. Like I tried to tell you. You have to have a little bit of confidence in your spotters, especially in like relationship problems where everything is emotionally charged. That's what a lot of relationships are, is emotional connection.
yeah,
And if you're having a problem, it's like you got to see what the people on the outside are seeing.
yeah. And that
Yeah.
that's of course so difficult. Yeah, that is even impossible, really. Sometimes I guess with
Absolutely, especially if they got tunnel vision, what I call tunnel vision, where they're
yeah,
so
yeah,
focused on this one thing that they can't see anything else, and anything you tell them that isn't in their tunnel,
yeah,
they're like, no, 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 that's not actually happening. It's like, oh yeah, watch this. Give it a day.
yeah, 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 yeah. So if so I want to end on our final thing that I like talking about death, but let you have more note stuff talk about it,
um,
bring anything up, but yeah, I'll if you have everything, I want to bring that up. Kind of the same questions that I talked about with Josh. Um,
I think the
about
only other thing I had was just a note that I had heard before
yeah,
about
even a comment. Yeah,
like the complexity of God, or the
mm-hmm,
concept of God. And here we are having a conversation. We're trying to look at all these different things and what this thing out there that matter in space and time is dependent on, and whether or not we can call that God is when I think about the concept of God is when we're trying to wrap our head around it. How how simple of a God would God have to be in order for us piddly humans to actually understand it? So we can have all these discussions about things that we can't really figure out, that are outside of matter, space, and time,
mm-hmm.
and try to wrap our brains around it. How successful could we possibly be if God was complex? What kind of God would God be if we could actually understand? It kind of takes the whole concept of faith out of it. And it's like, if we had everything figured out, we wouldn't be nearly as stupid as we are.
No, I in some ways, I feel like it is simple. Like from that underlying that that just the way that I conceptualize it is actually it is just like it's one thing, and the complexity is that's expressing, but actually at its core, it seems like it would be simple almost. I mean, it like Josh brought up love. Like I actually like that. If it's not consciousness, my second choice would be love. That's what is the underlying, and that love. I mean, we think of love. Love brings birth. I mean, love is the source of. It has to have. I guess whatever it's something that, again, like I said, I mean, yeah, who am I to possibly understand what it is? But at the same time, if and again, we didn't get too much into it, but the Facebook post that really sparked this converse or our initial conversation, and then now you're talking about what Josh and I talked about, but we were talking about the idea of like the self, or I was just kind of trying to say that like if the self doesn't inherently exist as one thing that is permanent that we can truly identify, even though there is this essence of self that I have, but if instead everything that exists is the expression of one thing, then we actually are, well, kind of like you said, I mean, we're making it much more complex, but what if that is all that is one simple, it's just love. The nature of the universe is love. So that, that's, to me, that seems plausible, that it's just love. There it is. Some that it's not a complex thinking thing that is here tinkering with everything, that actually everything that exists is the expression of love. Now that, of course, that brings in the problem of how does evil happen and all that, but I mean that's going to be the same for mine or Christianity or anything. I mean it kind of is, it kind of seems like that's compatible with some of Christianity, that there's just this underlying love, and it's just a ray law, and everything that exists is generated from that one. So just to kind of come back and say I actually don't think of God as being complex. I think of it as actually a just one fundamental that is, yeah.
Well, it's kind of funny because I view God as a complex thing, because I mean, when you're talking to your 4-year-old and they ask a question that you don't think they're ready for the real answer yet, you kind of give them a little answer that's something they can understand, and then they're satisfied with the answer. And so, like the Bible says, God is love. Okay, so that totally fits your something else's. There's something out there that matter space time is dependent on, and that then is God. Like, it isn't a question, especially if you're talking about the underlying thing being love. Then God is love. Then the underlying thing is God. And I think statements like that are you can't understand yet. So here's your answer. And this is going to be the thing that you can understand. It's the underlying thing is love, you know, because it's simple. We can figure it out. We can feel love. We can feel the connection with other people and be like, oh, okay, everything's love. God is love. Cool. I get that. But I don't think like that underlying thing that matter space time is dependent on is that simple. I just think that's the box we cram it in. We cram it into that box because anything too complex, we're going to get lost. We have little piddly human brains where we can't really understand certain things. Like, we still don't know how the brain works. We can dissect it and we can poke and prod and come to some conclusions about some things. But if you take somebody who is alive and somebody who is dead, if there's no like real physical problem where we can put our finger on it and say that's the problem right there, we don't know how they died. We don't know what it is that made the brain no longer have all these synapse firing things that we can detect with our little tools and sensors and medical equipment. We don't actually know. So we say, oh, they're dead. It's like, what's the difference between something that's alive and something that's dead? It's like, well, we can't measure the stuff from dead people. It's like, okay, but what is the real difference? You can't set a living brain and a dead brain side by side and be like, oh yeah, here's the difference. So I think the underlying thing that everything is dependent on is more complex than just love. It's just that's the box we cram it in so that we can understand it. I can tell you're thinking.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, I mean, from some perspective, yeah, obviously, whatever underlies something, as I mean, I'm listening to that as like, okay, there's this, we can see complexity here in this realm. So obviously, if this complexity depends on something, it would have to be more complex than what we're able to witness. But I don't know. I mean, I still feel it. I mean, I feel like it's what it's producing is complex, and I guess in some ways, yeah, it's complex, but I feel like it couldn't have parts, I guess. So and complexity seems like it's divisible into parts. So I'm seeing that whatever
Well,
this thing that depends on
it could still be a utensil drawer. It could be one thing called a utensil, but then have different categories, subcategories of the utensils. So we talk about God, but especially like from a Christian perspective about the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost that you were talking about, and you and Josh were talking about. It's like three components of the same thing that composes or comprises God. So it's like there are still parts, but it's still God.
And I think that's one of the problems I have, and with with that. To me, I can't divide. I feel like I can't divide. If I divide it, then by dividing it, I'm actually putting it into a bigger box. Maybe so. I'm kind of going with that analogy. I do, but it's like once we break it up, then okay, that's not the real thing. There's something underlying that is one. Again, it's not. I don't know that I can logically deduce that it has to be that way, but then yeah, why stop at 3? Then I'm in, that's the other. I guess my options are it's either 1 or infinity, and I'm just more comfortable with 1. I once you break it into 3, it's like, why would you stop? I mean, if it's God, then it's not going to be 3, it's going to be a gazillion. I mean, right?
Well, so I see the Trinity as
Can you
like
explain the Trinity? Because I actually
different components of the whole.
The ghost part. I mean,
okay. So
really
what I thought of was similar to what Josh was saying. So like the Father is the God that is underlying matter space time. Okay, that's the essence part that we can't really get to because that's the God part that's outside matter space time. Jesus was the physical matter space time representation of God the Father. That is how God the Father becomes part of the Father or the part of the matter space time. In our form. When God says He created us in His image becomes Jesus.
okay.
There is the Son.
Okay.
So that is the physical matter space time representation of the Father.
Okay.
Okay.
So
And so
okay, yeah.
because the Father is outside matter space time, the way to enter space time, matter space time, is the Son. Okay. And like the whole time through the Bible, Jesus is talking to the Father, talking to the Father, talking to the Father. And there is no way, you can get to the Father except through me. And I think the ghost part is kind of like the connection through consciousness. So, like the ghost to me is kind of like the bridge between us who are locked in the matter space time to the Father.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to get that is through Jesus, because like the Bible talks about believing in Jesus and you can get to the Father. So it's like Jesus is handing out the ghost card. Here, take the ghost and you can communicate with the Father. So then that's the third part. That is our bridge from matter space time
Yeah,
to the Father.
yeah, that's for me, that's problematic in that is dualism. That's the problem with dualism. That if that bridge either to me, or I actually no, I'm when I'm listening to that, I'm like, okay, I'm doing it more of like a representation of I can, to me, the idea of it like a human being, like I look at it as the God, and then what represents Jesus is the entire universe. Like the entire universe is an image of himself or something. But then yeah, how would they interact? Then you're talking about this ghost. To me, actually, then those other two, Jesus and God, are actually just not. There's just one, and it would be that bridge in which those two components. If we do, that's what I'm saying. Once we start dividing God into parts, I automatically I want to, okay, which one is the real one? To me, right there, the ghost is the real one. I guess that's and those other ones are, we can still, I mean, when I say dualism, actually everything is dualistic, or not everything, but I mean there are, I mean, like yin yang. I talk about the Tao a lot. There are these opposites. So in a sense, in the Trinity, it sounds like God represents consciousness, Jesus represents matter, and then, but for me, and I do recognize that consciousness and matter exist, but there has to be something underlying that. And to me, it's not a bridge; it's an underlying. I guess I see that description of the Trinity as the Holy Ghost being what underlies the other two. So
Okay, I think I see what you're saying, and I think then I'm just wording it poorly, because I see like Father being the underlying thing, and for us to ever leave matter space time, we have to have some method of getting to the Father, and so I view kind of like the ghost as, I mean, I say bridge,
okay,
but maybe it's more kind
okay,
of like a vessel. I don't
yeah.
know how to really describe
No,
it.
no, it is. It's the problem with. Uh, I know I can't visualize. I mean, just because I can't visualize doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I know. I mean, it's incomprehensible, which again doesn't mean anything that it can't be true. But yeah, I can't see how physical realm could. To me, that is like that if you are able to connect two things that are fundamentally disconnected,
Different.
different, yeah, just then whatever there is to connect those has to kind of be the encapsulate. I mean, to me, that would be bigger, that would be greater than, I mean,
Well,
than
I think maybe our disconnect is the consciousness part, because here I am alive in matter space time with the ability to think,
Mhm.
being something other than a non-sentient tree, as far as how we are as humans and the ability to communicate and whatnot. I think of my consciousness being trapped here with me. So I wake up in the morning and I have a catalog in my brain of the time that has happened before that morning. And as I go through the day, I'm just cataloging more and more through my passage of time as like a memory. And so those memories, I think, are what play a role in consciousness, because that's what makes us different from a rock or plants. As far as we know, they don't have a consciousness. So having that consciousness, I don't think is necessarily part of the bigger outside of matter space time, because it's trapped here with me. I'm not remembering things 10 years from now. I'm remembering things from 10 years ago. So it's trapped in that time element, at least with what I'm doing currently and what I have done in the past. And so if you think about what makes you who you are, it's not necessarily your physical body, I would say. It's experiences, it's memories, it's your ability to think, what you've learned, who you've talked to, the impressions people have made on you. That's who you are. That's your consciousness. And so, like you want to talk about death, after the physical death, what happens to the consciousness? Well, the consciousness, I think, could essentially be stuck here if you have no bridge to, say, the Father through the Holy Ghost, a guide, if you want to say. So there you are, a ghost running around the planet with no body, nowhere to go. If you have some connection with the Holy Ghost can be like, "Hey, dude, come on over here." And now all of a sudden, you're leaving your matter, space, time body behind, and your consciousness is going to that higher level with the Father. Does that make more sense?
No, it does. There's just on that, I guess I don't have the belief of something. I do believe that I believe that in some form the consciousness or the spirit is continuing. The death is not like the end. There's constant expression. I don't. A couple things. I am actually kind of pantheist. I actually do believe. I believe all life for sure has some degree of consciousness, but even rocks. But I think of rocks as not like, I don't, even trees actually, like I think of a tree, probably one single tree, as equivalent to at least a couple neurons. So I mean, I think consciousness actually is like it actually exists outside of us. I don't look at it as being contained by us. There is something very unique about our brains, like they're an antenna or something, that they're able to definitely focus experience and sensation in one concentrated way that no other life form or rocks does. But if you look at the span of the universe and the whole of all the rocks are generating some consciousness, again, it kind of goes back to that everything is an expression of the underlying, we'll call it consciousness, but it could be love or the underlying thing. So in a sense, everything is pieces. We have a very uniquely human experience in that there's so much concentrated consciousness. It's like we're almost a microcosm for the forest, but within a forest there is as a whole. So it's not just pick up one rock, this rock thinks, but in relationship to this rock and those trees and this water that's flowing and everything, that there is something, and that taking down one tree it could change it. So it's weird because there's definitely something significant when the human dies. There was a very significant concentration of consciousness that like more than chopping down a tree or even a forest fire. But
and I got a funny feeling when I said tree, because I look at things like trees, animals, or even stupid little bugs, as we can recognize that they're alive. There is some kind of force that is allowing things that aren't necessarily sentient to exist. Like trees, you cut off a limb and another one grows. Why does it grow? Something is making that grow. I don't know if I would necessarily classify that in the same sense as like human consciousness, but there's definitely something there. And yeah, I don't know where else I was going to go with that. Yeah. But it's I don't look at a rock and think, oh yeah, that could be something special. Sure. But if you look at really large rocks like the moon, that's a really big rock that has gravitational pull. So there is something there, even if it isn't necessarily what we would be equivalent to a life force. Sure. There is something there, and that's something we haven't been able to really measure yet. Not really detect, like gravitons. We can look at electrons, we can look at physical stuff, but we can't really see or detect what is pulling the planets towards the sun and the rotation of everything keeping it from falling into the sun. So and I think on that level, that might I wouldn't really tie that in with like the Trinity.
Okay, yeah.
Because it just seems like there's something more that we still don't understand. And something I'd say, like all of physics, really, that is being controlled in some way, shape, or form by something.
Sure, sure, sure. So, so yeah, let me get to my that final thing. I'm gonna rephrase it for anybody that's only listening to this conversation. I kind of you already did hear it if you listen to me talk to Josh, but I might also say it in a slightly different manner. And this was this is like my newest, largest focus, and I think it's really interesting. It's mostly what I've noticed when I study psychologists is really their theories on psychology are really just like them in introspection on themselves, which we all share some psychological qualities with other humans, so they're good. I wouldn't dive too deep into any psychological theory created by somebody else because really all you're doing is looking into their mind, but we can pull things out of it. So by all means, disclosure, this is my kind of psychology. You're going to kind of be diving into my mind, but if the fact that I'm diving into it in this manner, I feel like there's probably some that a lot of humanity could probably relate to some of these ideas. And specifically, I actually am trying to touch something deeper than, or I don't want to say deeper, just not just unrelated to what somebody's religious views are. And that's that we how we die. There's obviously a religious aspect that for a Christian, they're going to want to die in a manner that gives them that they're judged correctly or for they're going to the place they want to go. But at the same time that there might be things that are unrelated to that. So aside from that, like just looking at your life, in short, my question is how do you want to die? But I just want to put some kind of caveats on that. Is that the right word? What does caveat mean? I don't know. But sometimes I say words and I don't know if that caveat is put caveats on it, put extra things on it. I mean, I don't want to overcomplicate it because that in a sense that's my question. But I guess I want to, because we've been talking about religion a lot, I want to just kind of look at that. Aside from that, just like, I guess my theory is that if we have the ideal death envisioned, that it will help us live an authentic life. And sometimes we disconnect ourselves. Some of the examples I use are like, most people don't want to die in a hospital. And if they do, then that's okay. But for most cases, people would want to be out. Now, how sometimes for me, it's in nature. Some people could be with family and friends. It could be, they might want to have some monument, or they might want to go to this bucket list. I mean, those things are all different. And it doesn't matter. I'm not specifically addressing what somebody's ideal death is, but there is an ideal death that we actually usually don't address. And we're kind of, we try to not think about death, and we either think of it as it's up to God or it's random. And in either case, or it doesn't matter, it's going to happen, I'm not going to know. And those are all completely different, like spiritual perspectives. But actually, I'm trying to think of, it doesn't actually matter which one of those you have, just the fact that there is an ideal death, that if we know what that is, then it kind of gives us some direction, because I feel like a lot of people end up, and this comes from the research that I asked about people who have experienced the death of a loved one, and there seems to be sometimes the last words in conversations were sometimes about regrets and resentments and things that they wish weren't. So my goal is to prevent that, because I think that would be the most terrifying thing to end this life, regardless. I mean, and some people feel like, oh, I don't care, I'm going to go see God, and maybe it doesn't matter. But still, it seems like under any circumstance, if you're an atheist that believes it's just complete blackness, if you're going to get reincarnated into another life form, or you're going to live continuously, we would still want to leave this world under any circumstance. It seems like your last thought would want to be a pleasant one, right? So I guess encapsulating all that, any thoughts on that?
How do I want to die?
Sorry, how do you want to die? But
it's funny because, I mean, it's funny, but it's not funny with all the medical issues my wife has had.
Yeah.
I always like if I put myself in her position and they're like, hey, yeah, you got like 2 months to live. I joke in a half joking manner and I say, if I get a diagnosis, it's like, hey, you don't have long to live. I tell everybody that they're going to see my level of risk skyrocket. I'm going to go skydiving. I'm going to ride my motorcycle as fast as I can. Doing a bunch of dumb stuff, I suppose, is what I'd end up doing because it's like, I don't have much time left anyway. If I die skydiving, whatever,
Yeah.
my clock is ticking anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And, as long as I don't go out taking other people with me,
Sure.
then I guess it really doesn't matter how I die. Of course, I would rather not be bedridden. I don't even want to be old enough to have somebody else having to wipe my ass for me.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a burden. So it's like, if it's time to go, just take me. Don't prolong it. Just
Okay.
make it happen. Don't dilly dally. Just get her done.
Okay. So let me just kind of add on to that. So or ask more specifically. Yeah. So what would so those are I'm partly getting a picture of yeah how you don't want to die. So give me an ideal death. Where would you be? Who would be there with you? I mean it says yeah, not bedridden, not having to not be able to wipe your own ass. Obviously not pain. You're not going to want to be in pain. I mean those are things you don't want. But give me some more positive, not positive as negative, but like
What I
things I
do
like
want.
add. What do you want? What on top of what you don't want?
See, I find that hard
It is hard.
because I guess I don't want to die, so
Sure.
I don't put a lot of effort into.
Sure.
If I'm gonna die, how do I want it? I guess if I had my choice,
Mhm.
it would be quick. And like everything else I said, I don't want to be a burden. So I would be in a state where it's not really a problem if I die.
Mhm.
That's
Sure.
still kind of like what I don't want, but still kind of what I do want because I want things to be situated so that I'm not a burden. Um, my father-in-law just died this year, and he was laying on the couch, had a stroke, and was in the hospital for I don't even remember how long. It seemed like an eternity, and that's if his consciousness left when he had the stroke. Then laying on the couch watching a cool TV show, sign me up. If
Okay.
his consciousness didn't, then oh my gosh, that had to be horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Staring at the ceiling, not being able to control yourself in any way, like
Sure.
that is ridiculous. That's like a prison. But then
Yeah.
that's kind of like how I don't want to die again.
Sure. Yeah. No, it is easy to recognize how we don't. And my so again, this is more. This is how I'm like kind of introspection on my own mind, but I feel like it could be true for other people. Is that so? I mean, if you well, let me give you mine, and I I want to be. I guess I visualize dying as being extremely tired, where but you if you don't want to die, you can, or in this case, you don't want to go to sleep, you can stay up. But sometimes let's say
Yeah,
you're driving, and you got to go somewhere. So it's like I don't know if you've ever been dozing off.
yeah,
Driving is dangerous, right? But so it's like there's a point when you're like, oh, I just got to either you're gonna pull over, you got too far to drive, and you're gonna go to sleep, or you're gonna wait till you get to the place and fall asleep. I guess I visualize death being like that. Again, this is ideal. We do have to accept the fact that we could be taken anytime. Um, and that's part of it. So there is this underlying death anxiety, and I'm glad sometimes people focus on that and they're like, I don't care, it doesn't matter, I'm not scared to death. And I get that. That's definitely an important aspect of it. But yeah, we pushed that out of the way. So luckily we didn't spend too much time on that. You're accepting that's something we have to be. Now, there's some people who actually have death anxiety, and then that has to be
uh-huh.
addressed. It doesn't sound like you have that. But at the same time, you said one interesting thing you said is like if I had to die, and it's a funny conditional statement because you do have to
uh-huh.
die. So I guess that the point is that as long as we know that we do have to die, and although it could occur in any number of ways that is unexpected or terrifying. If we do kind of really try to like if we have this like ideal death, then it kind of gives us direction. So again, I want to just talk about mine. We bought this, and it's funny. I don't know at what point did I realize this is what I was doing, but I'm literally doing it here. I want to create my land, so I'm planting all these trees. It's about 1.5 acres, and it's on a river, and it's like I'm just creating this like natural area. I'm calling it my human sanctuary. I hope to actually, what I want to do around when I'm 60, so you're probably for you 17 years from now or so, 18 years from now, and I want to invite everybody to come to my land. Just basically just have it open for all will be around that age. So anybody I had, or even people I've never met before that just kind of want to visit here, and I just kind of want to have like these conversations with multiple people, and so I'm kind of creating this landscape that actually it could prolong for a long time. Like I don't have an age I want to die at, but I want to like you. I don't want to be a burden on anybody, but I just assume that's not going to happen because it's my ideal death. Again, it could happen, but I'm creating my ideal death. So in my ideal death, I get older and older, and I get less and less physically capable, right? So I'm doing a lot of hard labor now. I want to do. That's why I have that 17 year. I think till I'm 60, I can wheelbarrow and shovel. Around 60, I might want to take it easy, and then I'm just going to move to like pruning and gardening and doing more soft stuff. So, and then I guess so from when I'm 60, it's like I want to do any cool stuff that I want to do in the next 17 years. I don't really want to do traveling or any exciting stuff really after that. I just want to keep maintaining this land, and I want to have like all these fruit trees. So right now I'm planting the fruit trees from seed, so they 20 years from now it'll just be all this fruit forest, and I just want to be able to walk around every day. So I'm creating a daily something that I would like to just do every day, and it's wander around, drink tea and pick berries and stuff, and I want to create this lifestyle that I enjoy, but at the same time, when I get tired, going back to that analogy of falling asleep, that someday I'm going to be like, you know what, I'm ready to go to sleep, like for good. And I kind of visualize it like when you're driving. I don't think it's going to happen soon. I think I'm going to probably push it to some extent, and I think we do have control if our mind is the one that, obviously any physical injury that kills me, infection, disease or something is going to kill me before. But even if those happen, I think even a neurological disease or something, I might go into these process, but it might happen quicker. But again, I'm talking about my ideal death. So assuming that I'm in perfect physical health, but still my mind would just be getting tired too. And so I guess for me, that's my ideal death, is that I spend 10, 20 years just doing the same thing, wandering around my land until eventually I'm just like, and I'm actually picking out different spots and creating different spots in my land. Like, yeah, that would be the perfect place to go. And I actually wouldn't want to be with my son or wife necessarily holding their hands. I kind of want to just be by myself, although I would be with them in those 10 and 20 years. I would be with them a lot. I would talk to them a lot. I'm going to have my gatherings where people come and we talk a lot. But at that very moment, I'd kind of just like to just sit down and that same feeling when you're just like so tired, and you just finally, you just boom, you jump and hit the pillow and die. So in that sense, it would be quick, but it would. So anyway, yeah. So and because of that, I guess my point is that because I have that ideal thing, I'm so right now my life, everything, all I do is just I spend so much time on the land. I build walkways. Right now, I just got this big dump truck full of these like white rocks, which I put on top of gravel because the gravel was cheaper. So I kind of designed these walkways, but they're sharper. And I was like, I'm going to get higher quality round white river rocks and put them on top of that. And then, over time that kind of gets covered with bamboo leaves that fall and you can't even see them. I try to sweep them out of the way. I'll probably get in the future, put more rocks so that there'll be like these thick Roman roads or something around my lake. I've got time. So to me, I'm so passionate right now with my life. It's like, but the reason I'm happy is because I have this ideal way I want to die. So again, any does that rhyme, or does that anything there seem like okay, that kind of makes sense?
I
Maybe.
mean, it sounds cool, and I've always liked the idea of living out in the country. What I call it, I want like 20 acres, and I want to build. I don't really want to build anything. I want to build like a trail. I can
Yeah.
ride my dirt bike out around there,
Right, right,
or
right.
a couple little cabins here and there. But Virginia is really foresty. Like there is no place
Yeah,
that isn't covered in
that's
trees that
Virginia's where they
isn't
have the
already.
fall foliage, right? Everybody comes to see that.
It's everywhere. It's funny
Yeah,
though because they're all little twigs compared to the big trees you see in California.
here's my cat. My cat's coming in.
Hello, kitty. I have a cat sitting right here too.
Yeah,
He's
I
all
heard.
rolling around.
Um,
But there's so many trees in Virginia. They're so dense that to even clear a land is just kind of like, well, we'd have to
yeah,
call like a logging company in order to do it. But they're all little twigs, and I do kind of miss one of the few things I miss about California are like the huge trees. Because in
yeah,
Virginia, you'll see a logging truck, it's got 35 little tiny twigs on it.
yeah,
But in California, you'll see a logging truck and it's got 5 trees on it because they're just so huge. And that is so cool. Like Avenue of the Giants up in Northern California, the little road that goes to the redwoods and stuff. That's super cool. And I actually have a seed for what is it? What is it? A giant sequoia.
oh
Not
yeah,
that I'll ever see it get anything other
yeah,
than twig size,
yeah,
but I think it would be so cool to have a piece of land and plant a handful of those just because if you were to fly over Virginia,
yeah.
150, 300 years from now,
Mhm.
you would see all the regular Virginia twigs and then this huge tree or huge bundle of trees just sticking out in the middle of
Yeah,
nowhere.
yeah.
And that would be cool.
No,
And
that.
a bamboo forest.
Oh
A
yeah, that.
bamboo forest.
Yeah, that's actually kind of what, because we bought this land and it's an orchard of, or but I mean, or they're all orchards. Like we're past the village. Most of the people live in the village and they come here to tend to their fruit trees, which is, I don't know if you know what it is, a longan. Um, and all those trees are short. I mean, they actually could get big, but they and make them short on purpose, cutting them to easier to harvest and stuff. So we're
Yeah.
I'm kind of trying to do the same thing, even though I think this region did originally have large jungle trees, but I'm planting all the largest trees that I can find. I go up into the mountains, I'll collect seeds, and I've already planted some that are growing. So even now, I'm taking different pictures of the Google image. I see it updated every once in a while, and you can see this land compared to everywhere else is so much more flat because of the so much flatter from the trees aren't very high.
Mm-hmm.
So so it sounds like you got it. So you're gonna make that
I mean,
happen?
I never really thought about
No,
any
the
of
death.
that being related to death,
But
but
in a sense, yeah.
that's now that you mention it and like the concept of death, that's like I guess you could call it a bucket list kind of thing
Yeah.
because should I ever end up with 20 something acres or whatever, that would kind of be like my final home at least,
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
last building I would buy or live in. It'd be like, okay, now I don't have to move anymore. I don't have to think, oh well, I need to get this repaired on my house currently so that I can sell it and move to the country. I'll have moved to the country and it'll be like, all right, now I can build a Stonehenge because I think that would be cool. And, plant the giant sequoia in a bamboo forest. And then cool.
Yeah.
Like that's like kind of like you were saying, it would be cool to have other people come over to entertain and be like, "Hey,
Yeah.
check out my Stonehenge,"
Yeah. Yeah.
because there's a guy on YouTube you can look up.
I think I.
He moves large boulders or large rocks, and he lifted a stone thing that weighed as much as like a minivan
Yeah.
just by leverage and stuff. And he built a mini Stonehenge in his front yard, and it's like that would be so cool, except
Yeah.
bigger. Go,
Yeah.
go big or
Yeah.
go home. I'm gonna
Yeah.
build a
Yeah.
big Stonehenge.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'd love to. Our whole generation do stuff like that, and then just kind of you know, go around, visit different people. That'd be a nice way to kind of live our older years.
Mhm.
Visit other people's lands, because it is kind of like what I'm doing is yeah, like you said, not I am we've built stuff. I try to use as little cement and stuff as possible. When they built the house, they put a foundation down and stuff, but like I don't like it for the walkways. I like it all natural. It just feels
Mhm.
better, but different at the same time. There's a lot of places I go to that do, and it's different, and sometimes I'm thinking, wow, that's actually really beautiful. They really did it. Night their walkways, they'll build walkways. It's still a lot of nature, but they'll build proper walkways. I'm like, I can see how that's comfortable, and everything. That's nice too. So it's like I kind of like seeing other ideas. But yeah, it's like an expression of myself. So there's for people to come and see it and kind of be interested in things. I want to be here so much and create things that are, you'd have to really wander around and notice something. And sometimes I do actually, when the trees are young, big trees, but sometimes they'll grow close together. So I know they're gonna like combine or something. So, and I'll twist them up when they're young. And now some of them are really tall, and like they're kind of fused together. It's really interesting. And I want people to just walk by and look at it and wonder, they're going to wonder, like, and I even think about after, to me, like, I don't want to be remembered. I don't care if my name people, but I want things that I do to make people think. And so I'm doing some weird things with trees and the way I twist them up. And I would love somebody to just walk by and look at it and think, like, I want to make people think, I wonder.
Stop and look at it and be like, what
Yeah,
was going on to
yeah,
do that?
that would be cool. So I hope to leave those impressions. But yeah, I mean, thanks for this conversation. The first part of it was introduction and stuff. But I'm gonna have ideas in the future, or if and if you want to come on into like one of my friends, Ross, who's on here, my last guy that I have, yeah, I called it intellectual booty call. Right? It's like it's important, man. It's I mean, to me, it's necessary to have these deep conversations, and we don't. It's like I said, how many people are going to listen to it? Some people might. That's not the purpose of it, but it is to stimulate other people. Think when they listen to us, maybe they think, hey, maybe, oh yeah, I need to have that conversation with somebody. If they're interested, even if I don't know them, they could contact me if anything we said, just like you were listening to Josh and and you were taking some notes about some specific things, because I think it is when you listen to somebody else having a conversation, there is a feeling of wanting to jump in. So I want to welcome anybody. I love this. I need it to do it, and I hope to do it again sometime.
Sure.
All right. So have a good evening. It's midday for me, so I'm gonna get started working on
Yep.
my land, maybe moving some rocks around, and hopefully
Good
maybe
morning.
17 years when I start doing
Right. Time ticking.
that. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Have a good one. Good night.
All right, later, man.
Bye bye.